Right.
So therefore, they stripped away that decentralization. They put central players in it. You have control. It's not a blockchain. It's just a shared database.
Private blockchain is just a very fancy word of saying it's just a marketing thing. Hi everyone, we are Francesco and Merens from the Crypto Valley here in Switzerland. This week we will talk about the two biggest failures of private blockchain project and why this happens. So stay with us to learn if private blockchain are actually useful or they're just hype. As always, we will start with a short clip, so let's get started.
I'm with you. I heard a talk, so Protocol Village yesterday, I was emceeing that stage. At the very end, there was a conversation between Sergey Nazarov of Chainlink and a high-up official at State Street, a big bank, right? And they were talking about these sort of business efficiencies that blockchain can provide. I don't really understand what's catalyzing some interest around that conversation, because it just feels reminiscent of last cycle, right?
So Merens, we saw this was a video from Consensus 2023 where this gentleman was questioning the usefulness of a new layer to actually trade assets and digital assets. So before getting into private blockchain and all this talk about, let's first start to understand what is a blockchain.
So what is blockchain? We could start with a payment system. Here we have several parties who wants to transact. So for instance, on the left-hand side, let's call him Jack, wants to send money to Phil. How does it work today? Well, we have a central intermediary here, and this intermediary keeps track of whoever owns how much. But of course, there are some problems associated with that intermediary because, for instance, you have high fees. So some people thought, well, can't we get rid of the intermediary and just do a peer-to-peer network? Right. And yes, that is possible, but we need another system to keep track who owns how much, how money has everyone in his bank account. And how do we do that? Well, every participant keeps track of the accounts of all other participants. And the problem here is, of course, everyone is inclined to manipulate. So he would say, right, well, I have more money in a bank account than I actually have.
Exactly. How can I not commit manipulation and say, hey, no, I want just to make my accounts bigger?
Exactly. So we need rules to establish that all of these accounts are similar, are identical. And for that, we have something called consensus mechanism. It makes sure that all the people comply with the rules. And if they comply, they receive a little reward, which is they receive some bitcoins. And this makes sure that actually you can achieve consensus in a decentralized register on how much each person owns without an intermediary.
So a blockchain is really a decentralized database, yes, with a consensus algorithm, which allows everyone to agree on the state.
Exactly. Like here, what you can see is definition of a blockchain. As you said, it's a shared database.
Right.
And the entries of the parties, in this case, bitcoins, are controlled by the parties using cryptography, so private key, public key. And it's a bookkeeping mechanism, including a consensus mechanism. And this makes sure that the entries are immutable.
Is a shared distributed database where there is a consensus algorithm which allows everyone to agree on the state of the blockchain. And you don't need a central intermediary to process all these transactions.
Exactly.
And we checks if you're actually entitled to send money to someone and you're not sending money to someone else.
Yeah, and this was a very technical introduction into the topic, but I think it's important for the audience to understand how it works.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, a lot of people have been working on that. So this is a very old problem in computer science. Right. And how do you achieve consensus in an open network with a consensus mechanism that works? Everyone has been working on that. There is tons of research on that, but it was not before Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008 when he developed Bitcoin. Yeah. And it actually worked. He even provided the whole code, and it worked. So this is an astonishing thing that you can reach consensus without a central intermediary.
Exactly.
And if you think about it, about the central intermediaries around us, so you have banks, for instance, you have land registries, you have a stock exchange in which we are here.
Right.
So there are tons of intermediaries around in this world, and you can get rid of all of them in theory. And that's the power and the beauty of blockchain.
So now that we have an idea of what a blockchain is, we can start diving in what are the difference of a public blockchain and a private blockchain, I guess.
Yeah, so it's best to explain what is the difference by looking at some key characteristics. So what we have here is a comparison of these two types of blockchain. And we have a public blockchain where everyone has access to the network and can take part in consensus. That's what we said. Everyone can become a miner. I can become one, everyone who wants to. Whereas in a private blockchain, only a single organization will have access and authority over the network. So therefore, it's restricted. The access is restricted, and you have a central gatekeeper who says whether you can join and participate in the consensus mechanism or not. And this is the difference. So you have different access. Not everyone can join. And
so this is the first difference between the two.
Exactly. Then another very important difference is like the authority. In a public blockchain, everyone can participate in the further development of the blockchain. So it's an open source program, source code where everyone can participate. But here it's more like most of the times it's closed shop, and so only like the parties controlling it can then further develop it. That's the second one. The third one is transaction speed. So traditionally you would say like in a public blockchain is very slow. And so for instance in Bitcoin you would need 10 minutes roughly.
Which is kind of true.
Yeah, is very slow. And whereas in private blockchain you have very high
transaction per seconds.
Yeah, also very low latency, or it's very fast actually.
Yeah.
Then the consensus in this case is permissionless. So everyone can participate in it. Everyone can become a miner. But in a private blockchain,
or a validator, depending on the...
Yeah, but in a private blockchain, there is like a gatekeeper who says whether who can participate or not. And this is most of the times, like for instance, a bank or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you have the efficiency, as you already mentioned, transaction per second is very high, can be very high in private blockchain, and traditionally is lower in public blockchain. Maybe we can talk a little bit later on that.
Yeah.
Then the other one, data handling, everyone read and write access, like everyone can participate in the consensus mechanism, and a private blockchain is very limited. And immutability, well, public blockchains, you cannot alter it. They are timestamped, they are append only, so it's clear every data which is in there stays in there. And in a private blockchain is less immutable, so it means that
somehow you can change it.
So you can change it, exactly. So these are the key differences. And you see, because they have such different characteristics, they have also different use cases. So private blockchain is more used for enterprises, for instance, whereas public blockchain is mostly used for crypto projects, which are decentralized. After we saw what a public blockchain is and how a private blockchain is different from it, maybe it would be interesting to hear from the audience for what types of use cases are out there.
So we have a couple of big projects that have been done on the private blockchains, and as we promised at the beginning, we're going to show you two of the biggest projects who actually failed. And it's actually quite interesting because behind this project there were big corporation work. So I want to talk to you about today. The first project is TradeLens. This was a highly sponsored project made in combination between IBM and Maersk, which is one of the biggest container ship companies around the world. They started around 2017 to 2018. And basically the idea was to track all the containers that were shipped around the world on a public ledger and connect the various port authority for actually handling the transactions of documents in a much more easier and transparent way somehow. Well, this project was highly sponsored, a lot of millions were involved, the big players as you've seen, and what I want to show you is actually that this project since 2-3 months, so beginning of January, beginning of 2023, has stopped operation, fully stopped operation, because the project didn't gain enough tractions. And this came to me as a big surprise as well, to all of us, because I mean this was supposed to be one of the good use cases of a private blockchain.
Yeah, also I remember about it, like when it was introduced, it was a big fuss in the community that IBM and Maersk are now partnering on that thing, and also it was kind of intriguing to see, because in the shipment industry you have a lot of data and it's very analog still, and I think it made sense to do it actually in a blockchain.
And everyone was thinking, hey, this is the great killer application of blockchain, it's perfect use case, supply chain, go for it.
And what went wrong?
But what went wrong is actually, as we can see in this report, I'm gonna share with you some of the blog articles. The first article was written by Cointelegraph. One of these was that the IBM Maersk blockchain effort was doomed to fail, and an effort. And actually I like this article because they summarize it very well what went wrong. First of all, the innovation is not monolithic. So there are 4 kinds of innovation. The first is incremental innovation, and this is the example of the iPhone. From iPhone 13 to iPhone 14, there is an incremental improvement, which is, but this is still an innovation if we want to say, but it's not a big change. Then we have innovation which is architectural. What is architectural? Basically, Tesla is a perfect example. So why? Because in a car, we are changing the engine, you know, what's internal now. So before it was combustion, now it's electric. But the seat, the look, how it looks a car is still the same.
Okay. So the difference is you don't have a lot of new technology, but you have a big impact on the market with architectural innovation.
So now we're going to the other two, where there is innovation which are disrupted and innovation which are radical. Blockchain, what they miss to understand is that is a disruptive innovation. I'm gonna quickly make you understand why. So Netflix, for instance, is a perfect example. They didn't invent any crazy technology. They didn't invent the internet. They didn't invent. They started actually selling DVDs through post letters. But what was the game changer in their technology and in their new business model was when they started doing streaming. That's where they were disruptive. That's when actually they became the Netflix that everyone knows, because they started leveraging new technology for new business models, basically. The streaming, they were the first one to start with it. And so basically they used the new technology for a new business model. And that's what is a disruptive innovation. And that's and this is what is blockchain.
Okay.
But a radical innovation is, for instance, the invention of a new technology. So like Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Bitcoin was really when there was the invention, right? Basically, these companies fail to understand that blockchain is a disruptive innovation.
Yeah.
So meaning that this needs to be applied for changing business logic, and how it is really explained here, given the disruptive technology replaced existing framework, interaction, and intermediate institution. So basically the idea is to disintermediate institution.
And they didn't understand the disruptive technology?
Exactly. They didn't
understand. They treated it like how?
They treated it exactly as any other innovation, and they thought, okay, but we are going to apply this to our business case.
Yeah.
But they didn't understand that they were just having maybe potentially a marginal improvement, an incremental improvement. Yeah. That's what we said before. They were having an incremental improvement which was not enough for actually making a whole industry shift and adopting this technology. And then we go to the second point. Complexity is an innovation killer. So the problem with radical and disruptive technology innovation is that they are complicated. And this exactly was one of the main problems for IBM and the Macs, that they needed the collaboration of the whole world to actually go on the same layer and adopt this technology. And most of them didn't understand what was this. Okay,
so if I understand you correctly, so they thought, well, we have a little problem here, too much paperwork and so on.
Exactly.
So we just take blockchain and bring it to them and everyone will be happy.
Exactly.
But they didn't realize the complexity to shifting a whole industry into an entirely new technology.
Exactly. They didn't understand the complexity of making every single port authority. Here there is port, ocean carriers, customers, freight, international transport, shippers, everyone to adopt this new technology.
But I mean,
it basically shows the technology is complex.
But it's amazing because these are the biggest companies out there, and not even, I mean, Maersk is so dominant in the shipping industry, not even they were able to bring every party to the table and bring them to blockchain.
And they, so what's interesting about, about this project is that they had already a lot of transaction happening. It was not a small thing. They had more than 6 billion transactions, and a lot of shipments were tracked on this platform. So it was not something small already, it was something already very big.
Okay, interesting. What other types of applications do you have?
And this is the Wall Street Journal, which basically says again why the project between Maersk and IBM failed, and actually it also shows that there is Walmart who has started also adopting blockchain to track the food. And actually here we can see this the adoption of blockchain is actually not working as well. It is also interesting because, as we can see here, attempt to track grocery on blockchain continue to be, but slowly. So the complexity, and also the guys from Walmart say that the complexity is the technology, and to make it adapted to their suppliers.
So they wanted like transparency in the supply chain and introduce blockchain to get like the food producers, manufacturers, and delivery
to track
companies.
the whole
the supply chain
of food.
And Walmart is of course the biggest retailer in the world, and wanted that all of their suppliers come into one system, and they failed, right?
And they haven't failed yet, but so they started in 2018, as you can see here. Walmart partnered with IBM again on this project. 4 years since, just added one item: green bell pepper. So basically now they're tracking 2 products in 6 years of operation, 5 years of operation.
So
we can say
every 3 years a new product, right? So the next one will be in 2030.
In 2030, maybe they're gonna have 4 products.
Maybe
basically.
have salt or something.
Yeah,
like that.
but and also them, they're saying Walmart says they took time and onboarding process is daunting. Of course, like no one is benefiting from this. So this is another project that soon is gonna close shop. The Walmart food tracking.
Okay.
So this is what. But I also have another big project with the Australian Security Exchange.
Yeah.
That was the other big project who failed, and it's super interesting. So here we have the chairman of the Australian Security Exchange, who actually excused himself for closing the project after having spent more than 165 millions.
Wow.
It's a project who lasted 60 years. After 160 million spent, they stopped it. And actually it was interesting because they were working with a company for developing the technology here in Zurich. So the idea of this project was to upgrade the clearinghouse electronics sub-breacher system. So basically the process where it handles all the transactions. What the idea was to upgrade this. And the idea was to accelerate the settlement times and reduce costs. This was a big vision that they had. Clearly, to make everyone to adopt this was another. People couldn't see the real value in adopting something that was developed by one company and used only by them, and people could not see really the benefit of this. And they wanted exactly to deliver this post-trade solution to the world industry and have the state-of-the-art technology without them understanding that, again, they was not really solving major problems. And it's like in the video that we have seen, they just started in 2017-18 thinking, okay, we need blockchain to replace, to find a better way to ship goods around the world, but without thinking through, is this actually the right technology? Is this actually, do we really need this?
Yeah, exactly. So with the stock exchange example, it's the same thing, because we know it's a big mess to bring all the party on the same layer, and it makes sense to reconcile that data using blockchain. So this makes sense for the outset. It was a smart idea to do that, but they failed again, and they couldn't do it on a private blockchain.
Exactly. And again, this is another big project that closed shop. Quickly, to conclude this argument on private blockchain and failed project, so there are some projects that are still going on, like the Visa and JP Morgan private blockchain network. So there is JP Morgan who is trying to create this link network for exactly exchanging goods, digital assets. Now they are partnering with Visa on their B2B Connect. Honestly, it's another project that has been going on for 6 years. Not much attention has been dedicated to it. This is another big project, is the Broadbridge, who's now facilitating 70 billion of repo or repurchase agreements. So this is another big project where they're involved in private blockchain. But what's interesting is that yes, they say that they are using private blockchain, but here, look at this. The company is known for its work of using distributed technology, similar to blockchain that powers Bitcoin, but with centralized control. So basically, they are saying that they are using a blockchain, but they are not using a blockchain. They are using they're using a distributed database with some elements of a blockchain, and they are saying that it's blockchain, but it's clearly not. So all this private blockchain is just a very fancy word of saying. It's just a marketing thing.
That brings us exactly to the next point, actually, because we now saw some of these projects using private blockchain. Most of them used Hyperledger, I guess. And now the question, we saw none of them really worked. And the question is now, what is the unpopular opinion about private blockchains?
The unpopular opinion is that private blockchain is just a confusing name for shared database. That's nothing else. And here there is also a great articles that we've seen where it's clearly explain our point. Private blockchain is just a confusing name. It's just, and to make it very simple, actually I brought up a pictures that explain this concept. So, what do a Christmas three-course meal and a sandwich have in common with blockchain? Apparently nothing, but it's very similar to how private blockchain and blockchain works. What banks are doing today, so basically they are taking this amazing meal, which is our Christmas meal, which is a public blockchain, what's the core Bitcoin code. They are stripping out everything that they don't need, stripping out like all the different consensus algorithm, all this part that they don't need, and they're making a sandwich. And this is the exact same thing. They're from a very good meal where you could have just, for a sandwich, if you needed to build a sandwich, to eat a sandwich, you could just buy vegetables, some tomato, some bread, and do a sandwich. Why do you don't need to prepare a three-course meal and then take only the two elements that you like and create a sandwich. So this is a really interesting example that I found similarity, and this is what banks are doing. So if they didn't know that the three meals or the Bitcoin core blockchain existed, they would just take some the tools that they need for building in their database, and they create the sandwich.
Maybe to come back to the start, what we said is the amazing thing about blockchain is that you can reach consensus without the central intermediary. So you can get rid of all the central intermediaries. Then all the big players heard about blockchain and thought it was cool, and it affected them, so they also tried to do something about it. So they worked together with IBM, which is not a big surprise, and then tried to bring their application on the blockchain. But of course, they always need to compromise on things. So therefore, they stripped away the decentralization. They put central players in it. You have control. It's not a blockchain. It's just a shared database, and there's no real use case as of today for it.
I mean, also because they maybe involve some aspect that they are using blockchain, like hashes, signatures, cryptographic, some part of cryptographic. But these are not some of these are not the core elements of Bitcoin. These were things that have been known for 25 years. And actually, it's interesting to see that most of these things have been known for many, many years. So had signature and hash pointers, which, they improve the security of a database, but they're not to the level of a public blockchain. And this crypto technique, it have been known for 25 years. They are not something that they found out the other day. That's why I made the comparison of a sandwich and a 3-meal course, because they could have just built directly the sandwich. It's just now that they find out, oh, there is a 3-course meal, but I don't need this and that. I'm just gonna take maybe a piece of some leaves or whatever, you know?
Yeah, what I think is the worst part about is it's not even, if you use a private blockchain, it's even worse than a conventional database because it's slower.
Exactly.
So there's really not a lot of use case out there.
There are not a lot of use case on private blockchain. At least till today, we haven't seen a single good use case. And some of the biggest use cases actually are closing shops.
Now that we are approaching the end of the video, we saw some of the applications which failed, that private blockchain don't have a lot of use case as of today, also why this is the case. And maybe it would be interesting, do you see a future for private blockchains?
Honestly, I don't see a future for private blockchains. I'm happy to be dismissed in the future if something comes up that's gonna be useful, but to be honest, as of today, I don't see a good use case because I don't see any other different than what a traditional database can do, or a traditional shared database is 100 times better. So as of today, I don't see any good use cases. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let us know what you think about if private blockchains are useful or they're just hype here in the comments, and follow us for the next video next week. Click like if you like the video and subscribe to our channel for news on fintech and blockchain. Thank you a lot.